How's it going, future YCS champion? Before we start the video, head on over to wnaxtcg.com. We have a lot of cool items. We're in the season of giving, so why not give yourself or someone you love an awesome gift? Let's get into the video.
Team WUNAX. Joe, DJ.
Hey guys, Joe here. Today we're going to be breaking down the top 32 from the remote duel YCS, which took place last weekend. Definitely one of the smaller ones, less than 600 players, I think around 500 and something. 10 rounds of Swiss, cut to top 32, and here's the top 32 breakdown. We see 18 tier, 5 Sprite, 5 Flunder, 3 Runic, and an Exo Sister. I guess things that stand out to me the most, like the 3 Runic decks. Those weren't seeing a whole lot of popularity outside of the Natiri Runic deck that they were playing over in Europe a little bit. The Exo Sister deck, a little bit unexpected. I guess it has a really good tier matchup, but not the most consistent deck overall. Thunder for sure, and 5 Sprite is a little bit more than I would expect. And 1 Adventure Sprite is certainly interesting. But yeah, the tier deck taking up the largest percentage is not surprising based on what we saw in past YCSs. And then moving down into the top 16, we have 9 tier, 3 Sprite, 3 Flunder, and Natiri Runic. All to kind of be expected. And then when we move it on to top 8, it's just mainly Flunder and tier and 1 Sprite. Duelist, shout out to Kenny. Very talented player. And then we see Flunder Mirror in top 4 and a Tier Mirror in top 4. So 2 Flunder, 2 Tier, making it into the top 4, and then a Flunder Tier final, obviously. So, looking at the first deck list here, we have this crazy Floodgate deck featuring cards that came off the ban list recently, or became able to play more copies, I suppose. Defissure, 2 of those. 1 Day of Peace, really the interesting card, I guess. Prevents you from dying. Card of Demise is a card we haven't seen in a very long time. Since it's been put to 1, it hasn't seen a lot of play, but I can see how it would see play in a deck like this. Nothing super crazy in terms of the Runic spell lineup. 2 ofs in terms of skill drain and D5 certainly interesting choices. I feel like you want to max out on skill drain for sure. Rivalry, Tisubu, good choices as well. Goes in cool. But I don't see it in the deck. Messenger of Peace, this card is interesting. If a monster has 1500 or more attack, it cannot declare an attack. Pretty interesting, as well as cards like DD Dynamite. I'm not actually sure what this last card is here in the side. Oh, we can read right here on the comment, see if it tells us. Paradox Fusion. Interesting. And then we have Evenly, Sphere Mode, and a pretty standard extra deck. The new card that came out recently is really powerful as well. And then maxing out on all of the fusions. I would not want to play against this deck. There is no Mystic Mine, but there certainly are a whole lot of Floodgates in this deck, so I can see how it did well. Oop, sorry. On to the next one, we have a similar deck, except it's a little more streamlined at the 40 card mark. Playing 3 skill drain, I like that. And playing 40 seems to be, in my opinion, the best way to run a deck like this. You want to maximize the chances of you seeing your power cards like Demise or skill drain or something like that. Majesty's Fiend is a card that I think is extremely powerful. It's really difficult for tier to out this going second. They have to have a combination of Planet plus Scream, plus you having no way to stop the monster they summoned. So I guess that's a combination. Otherwise, they have to just normal summon a monster, set the trap, and wait to negate it. So definitely an extremely powerful card. I guess outside of Imperm and stuff like that. So Lava Golem, Dark Bribe, Evenly, Spooky Dogwood, nothing crazy here. We have the Maximus package, which is pretty interesting. Next, Exorcister deck. Pretty standard-ish. Nothing too crazy. Veiler Ash, Shifter Imperm. I'm not super sold on Ash in this deck. Same with Veiler, but I can see how Veiler and Imperm have become more popular recently, given just how impactful it is to negate Kit or something of that nature. The extra, nothing super crazy here either. More Necro Valley in the side deck comparatively in the main deck, which we saw at that YCS Niagara. People playing multiple Necro Valley and set rotation, all that good stuff. Let me see, D-Barrier, Judgment, all the crazy field spells as well, and the third Dark Ruler, which I think is interesting. Moving on to the first Naturia Runic deck. So we've covered all 3 Runic decks. Really interesting. It takes advantage of the Shizu cards really well. You will use them extremely effectively since they're Earth monsters as well. Naturia cards have become more and more like something that you should definitely respect and know what the cards do and how they interact. Mulcricket is an extremely powerful card coming out of the new set. Other than that, it seems pretty standard. I like the 3 talents. Interesting. Moving down to the extra, we're seeing more people play the other sword, Soul Synchro, as it's a big 10 and is really good against tier. Dagaris is a strong card. I definitely like. Being able to like dig through your deck as much as possible is really interesting. And then we freeze for the side, all the other Bestials, so Sorenir, and we have the Megamut and Druid's Worm in the main deck, followed by like Twin, Dark Ruler, Imperm. As well as Spooky Dogwood and the Cowboy, which is interesting. I see they're not playing the card that allows you to gain life at the Runic fusion monster, so that's interesting. But yeah, definitely a really powerful deck and has a lot of cool interaction. Next we have our first like tier deck. It's Kashtira tier with the Shizu stuff. It's pretty interesting. The Kashtira stuff becomes much better when we get some of the new cards. So we have the Kashtira field spell as well as 3 Fenrir and 3 Unicorns, 3 of the better cards in the archetype that we have available right now. 44 cards, kind of a lot for a tier deck in my opinion, though I know Jesse and them have been playing 43 by maxing out on the millers and stuff like that. But yeah, standard tier lineup, pretty standard. She's lineup, I suppose, like 2 Kelbeck's a little strange. 8 Bestials. Nothing too crazy. Imperm, a lot of people I saw playing Imperm and siding Veiler or something like that over the weekend. For the fusions, all the tier stuff, more tier cards. Wallow. Draco Sack is a really interesting card. I can see that can be super powerful. Not having your stuff being able to be destroyed and stuff like that. Into the extra, side deck we have the Scattershot, Necromancy, as well as Bell, which is extremely powerful since it not only prevents Bestials and the tier monsters, but also prevents the Ishizus. So it really stops like all of the main interaction cards. So it's super powerful. Then we have Talons, Lightning Storm, Zombie Birds, and Droplet, some of the most powerful going second cards in the game. Next we have the third place list, playing a Shizu tier again, but they're also playing Brandon High Spirits, which is a card we saw super popular for YCS Minneapolis, and it kind of fell out of favor. But I see how the card can be viewed as like something extremely good. Going first, it's really good to play around Bestials, since you can use it in the draw phase to play around Veiler and also Bestials, given that you don't have any monsters on the field. The only like potential flaws is the card is not super strong going second, and you have to open it with one of these tiers. You cannot open it with Rhinoheart. Speaking of which, the one Rhinoheart is a little strange to me. You want to be able to always have access to it to make the big fusions, so interesting. And then main decking the Crime, we've seen people taking it out, putting it in the side deck for a second Solak, keeping this in only going first, so interesting. As well as seeing the 2 targets for High Spirits, not just the 1 Albion. They're playing the Cartesia as well for potentially a Baron play. So pretty good 40 card main deck. I think the only change I would make is put a Rhinoheart in there. Second one. As for the extra deck, pretty standard. We've got the Baron in here, Redoer. Some people have been cutting down on. Side deck is pretty standard. I guess Storm a little different, but other than that, pretty much the same. First place list, Shadow Christian, second win, very much deserved. Playing a Shizu tier, maxing out on all the Shizu cards and not playing any Bestials, which is extremely interesting. As cards like Talents have become more and more popular, things like Bestials have become, less impactful, given that one Bestial usually is not enough to stop them, and if you're just using the one to attempt to stop them and they Talents you, the game is usually over, unfortunately. So being able to max out on cards that do not necessarily interact on your opponent's turn, other than like Kelbeck or Orange Light, and I suppose Havness, makes it so you're not hit with Talents as often. Super Poly is a card that we've seen be cut by a lot of people, so it's interesting to see it in the first place list. Card that requires a lot of setup and can be low impact if they're able to just resummon the tier monsters, or can be played around if your opponent knows you're playing it. We see the one Diviner still, so that gives you access to Baron as well as Orange Light being a tuner, so Baron being extremely strong into most decks of the format. Onto the extra, everything seems pretty standard. Nothing too crazy, no Wallow or anything like that, though it is interesting that he is playing Beatrice despite not playing any Bestials. I would assume that is just because you could make Garura, then Dark Summon Magnemite or something like that. As well as, I suppose, being able to Diviner, send one of the 4s, make it a 6, and then use Garura. For the side, lots of Flunder hate. We have the Necro Banshee, the Zombie World, as well as the Foolish. Foolish is an interesting flex card, allowing you to send either a Necro Banshee or a tier or an Shizu card, anything like that. And then we see Spooky Dogwood and Majesty's Fiend, which is an interesting card to me. This is a card that has very limited counterplay, going first in the mirror. You would have to, like we said earlier, use like Dark Ruler, Imperm Droplet, something like that. And the way that you'd summon it out is by special summoning one of the Shizus, or going like Sharon effects, discard something. There's a lot of ways that you don't have to use your normal summon, and allows you to still end on like somewhat of a board or something. So I can definitely see how it did really well for him. Moving on to one of the Flunder lists. Pretty standard list. I think the only thing that is a little unique is like the 3 evenly in main. It's kind of interesting to see how the Flunder lists have evolved, given that there's no Mystic Mine, so a little different in terms of changes. Some interesting targets here in the extra deck. Some high attack point monsters, even though they don't play Punishment, is a little strange. But I guess you don't need your extra deck all that often, though I do feel like things in making Zeus are extremely important. So, in terms of the side, Gold Sark, which can be used as an extender with the birds, as well as just a way for you to search a specific out or something. Change of Heart Duster, Triple Cosmic, Triple Judgment, and 6 copies potentially of RB's Featherstorm, card that is still legal and dodged the Forbidden Limit list once again, which was very surprising to me. And a card that has actually no counterplay now, given that Red Reboot is banned. So, yeah, more Flunder. Hooray. Looking at the 4th place list, we have Dom Couch's list. He's been doing really well this season. Something unique is he's playing Enemy Controller. Really interesting card. Allows you to dodge things like Imperm Veiler, Sulic, by tributing your guys, which can be really strong. Also, another thing we see is Triple M-Pen. Definitely a different take, but I can see how it'd be super strong. In terms of other things, we don't see it terraforming in the main deck. It's in the side here, which is a little bit interesting, given that the deck can have some issues with breaking, and you want to be able to see map as consistently as possible. Outside of that, to the Impermanent Veiler, which people have been moving more and more towards. List honestly looks very solid. Clean 40. For the extra deck, gigantic spread is really interesting. I would assume being able to like take something with enemy controller and like make down it over it, or make gigantic or something like that. And we see the triple Zeus here, even though there's no extravagance. Just being able to like make multiple Zeus seems really strong. Definitely like a more thought out extra deck. I'm a big fan of that. In terms of the side, we see Nib. People have been playing that more and more for tier. Just like a high impact card. And then we see Terraforming, Set Rotation, the Necro Valley stuff, more tier hate, as well as Duster, Storm, and 2 more of the Continuous spell, which is interesting, given that you know, it can be super strong going second. Essentially, it works as like a Storm Forth, being able to tribute your opponent's cards. And then lastly, we have 3 of the Featherstorm. Moving on to the second place list, we have you know, some similarities, but the thing that stands out to me most is the 2 Mega Ryza. That is like an interesting change. I can understand Triple Empin, but Double Ryza does not necessarily make a whole lot of sense to me. Interesting to hear their perspective. We have 2 Book. Book is kind of fallen out of favor as it's not that impactful going second anymore. But I can see how it can still be used to dodge stuff like Sulik. Sort of the same role as enemy controller played in Dom's list. And we have the 1 Extravagance. Interesting. I guess you wanted a little bit more consistency. The 1 Called By, the 1 Duster in main is a little interesting to me as well. Not sure if I really want to open that card going first. Especially since we said earlier, like, the deck struggles with consistency. And we have 2 main decked Featherstorm, which is a little interesting to me, as well as main decked evenly. This one I genuinely don't understand. It's like, are you going to play Featherstorm because you want to do well going first, or are you going to play evenly because you want powered cards going second? I feel like they're conflicting. But it obviously worked out for him, so. In terms of the extra, we have more Slayer targets, which makes sense. Omega, Entis, as well as Trouble Sunny, and the Shurig, which works well with some of the bird cards. Onto the side, we have the Evil Twin monster. 1 Raigeki is interesting. The Set Rotation, Double Necro Valley, makes sense, more tier hate. DeFi, Cosmic, and Slayer is a card that we haven't seen a whole lot of play, but you can see it can be decent in this deck. Though it is not a card that you can resolve under Shifter, unfortunately. Then we see the 3rd Featherstorm and a Metaverse. Supposedly just like more Waystate to Necro Valley or something like that. And lastly, I would like to shout out Longevity. He put together this spreadsheet here where you can see the names of everyone if you wanted to message them and ask them questions. There's what deck they played as well as their placing, and you can also find their profile links. So if you wanted like more in-depth information of why someone played something, he's been updating this recently, and it also has on the bottom here all the past YCSs. So if I want to look at Costa Rica, I could look at Costa Rica, see all the players, see their YouTube links, and then it even has in some places the DB download links, so you can put it right into your DB account. You don't even have to go back and forth from the video because they can be a pain sometimes. So yeah, a lot of really good important information, and I'll include that link down below. It really helps me put together all the information here. So thank you for watching, and please subscribe.